It was already 94 degrees when the first horse died. Flies clouded the rider's face and sweat soaked his saddle, dripping down like rain over leather cracked to near snapping. The man sat slumped, staring at the lifeless heap that had once been his only hope of reaching the next creek before noon. But there wasn't going to be any noon for him, not out here. The map had lied, and the stone vault wasn't just a cool little cellar buried under some trees. It was the only thing that had kept her alive when the earth had cracked wide and steamed like a pot left on a fire for days. And now, it was the only thing that might save him too, if he could find it in time. But this story doesn't start with him. It starts 3 years earlier, when the letter arrived in Lancaster. Nobody ever said much about why she left. The papers called her plain, the preacher called her earnest, and the women who helped bundle her onto that westbound train said she had the good sense to be practical, not pretty. She didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't even ask where exactly she was headed in Pennsylvania, just clutched that envelope in her calloused hands and boarded the car with all the quiet determination of someone who had survived worse than gossip. Her name was Clara Hetfield, 23, lean as a cornstalk, strong as a mule, with hands red from soap and skin used to ignoring pain. She didn't wear lace or paint, didn't bring more than one suitcase, and didn't know the man she was about to marry. His name was Elias Weber, a widower with a broke-down farm, 2 boys under 9, and a letter-writing cousin in Pittsburgh who made sure the ad got printed in a Philadelphia newsletter no one read until Clara did. What the ad didn't mention was the heat. The part of Pennsylvania Elias lived in had valleys that held the summer like a box holds smoke. Thick air, still wind, and ground so dry it cracked open and buzzed with yellow jackets and centipedes. The stone vault, Elias's dead wife's idea apparently, was all that made it livable once August hit. The farm itself was falling apart, the well barely spit, and the barn had holes you could toss a cat through, but buried in the side of a shallow rise behind the house was a thing that didn't look like much at first. A pair of weather-worn stones forming an arch into the dirt, and a heavy wooden door so swollen it groaned every time you opened it. Inside, though, it was 22 degrees cooler, always, no matter what. Clara found it the first night. Elias had pointed toward the rise with the vague grunt of a man who'd forgotten how to speak to women, and said, "That's the vault. You'll want to keep butter and milk in there." That was all. No talk of love, no ceremony, just a handshake and a place to sleep beside the boys. She wasn't given time to feel hurt, but it didn't take long to realize the vault wasn't just for butter. The first time she opened it, her skin prickled from the air shift, like walking into a cave with water running deep inside. The walls were stacked stone, hand-chiseled and sealed with something that didn't crumble. The ceiling was low, but not so much you'd crouch, and the back of it curved downward like a tunnel that wanted to keep going, but thought better of it. A single oil lantern hung on a hook inside, and when she lit it, shadows danced on the rock like ghosts waking up. It wasn't fear she felt, it was awe. Elias said little about who built it. "Wife's grandfather, German, Mason," he muttered one morning, staring out at the pig lot like he was too tired to remember more. "Said you could hang meat in there year-round, never spoil." The vault became Clara's heart. She cleaned it, catalogued it, made shelves from salvaged planks, and polished the old lantern's brass until it gleamed like a church bell. She figured out the drainage stone near the back, lined the floor with flat shale slabs, and used linen sacks of sand to brace the corners so no mice ever found a way in. She buried her quilts in it during summer days, and slept cooler than anyone else in the county. It was her sanctuary, and that's when the trouble started. Because when something works too well, folks start asking why. It began with a knock. A stranger, thin, bearded, hat too big for his head, said his name was Paul Theron, claimed he was surveying stone patterns for the county, though no one could remember seeing him with tools or maps. Asked odd questions. "This vault, does it breathe? Did you hear water beneath? How old is the mortar?" Clara said she didn't know and didn't like the way he stared at her hands, as if he could read the vault's secrets by the dirt under her nails. Paul came back twice. The third time, Elias found boot prints by the door, deep ones, like someone had stood there a long time. That night, the vault door wouldn't close right. Clara found small chips at the hinge. Elias said nothing, just fetched his rifle and started sleeping with it across his lap in the kitchen. Clara began locking it. Not just the vault, but her heart. The vault became the only thing she truly loved on that farm. Not the fields, not the boys, who barely spoke above whispers. Not Elias, who worked himself mute and drank himself still. Just that cool, dark place, where breath came easy and sweat dried before it reached her back. But she wasn't selfish. She began using the vault for neighbors too. Mrs. Holt down the lane, her baby near death from heat stroke, came begging one evening, weeping and holding her girl like a broken doll. Clara didn't hesitate. She pulled the vault door open, laid the baby on her folded shawl across the shale, and fanned her till dawn. The child lived, barely, but word spread. Next came the Mason brothers, their hogs dying faster than they could be buried. Then the preacher's wife, who stored her best candles and pickles in the back corner with a nervous nod and a trembling mouth. The vault became known as Hetfield's Hollow. Some said it was cursed, others said it was blessed, and the more they whispered, the more the air grew strange around the house, hotter outside, cooler inside, and not one of them could explain it. Then came the fire. It started in August, 4 miles south, when lightning struck the Odell's barn, and the dry fields lit like tinder. No rain for weeks, no wind either, just flame. The whole ridge glowed orange as smoke poured into the valley, and Elias, half-dressed and coughing, ran shouting for the boys. Clara didn't panic. She grabbed a bucket, then stopped. She didn't run for the well. She ran for the vault, not to hide, not to hoard, but to open it wide. The air inside sucked at her dress like a living thing. The cold rushed out, unseen, invisible, but she swore the flames slowed, not stopped, not reversed, but slowed. Elias barked at her to shut it. She refused. "This might be the only thing that saves us," she shouted, and he stared like she was someone else, someone not plain, not quiet, someone born to survive what no one else could. And she did. The fire took half the fence line, scorched the barn, left blisters on Elias's back from smoke, but the house stood. And the vault? Not a scratch, not a flicker of heat, not a mouse dead inside. The butter didn't melt, the potatoes didn't sweat, and Clara, holding the youngest boy in her lap inside the doorway that night, heard the first genuine word Elias had spoken in weeks. Thank you, but it wasn't over, because someone else had been watching, someone who'd marked the stone, who knew what that cold meant, and who had waited for the fire to pass before coming back one last time. And this time, he brought a shovel. The shovel was new. Clara knew the sound of old steel hitting shale. Hers had a notch on one side and a ring that rattled when you turned it just so. But this one was crisp, clean, like it had come from a store shelf and not a barn hook. She heard it before she saw it. One thunk, then two, then a rhythm, deliberate and slow, each strike like a clock ticking off the last seconds of something nobody could quite name. She didn't scream, she didn't light a lantern or shake Elias awake. She simply stood barefoot in the dark kitchen, dress hanging from her shoulders, damp with the kind of sweat that wasn't caused by heat, and she listened. When the shovel paused, so did her heart. When it resumed, it beat again, like her pulse and that sound were tied together by some thread. Then the door creaked open, not the house door, the vault. She moved without thinking, out the back, down the slope. Stones underfoot bit her soles, but she kept going. The lantern she'd left hanging inside the vault was flickering, the flame low, as if something had disturbed the air. The door stood half open, just wide enough for a man to slip through. The night was warm, but from the threshold out spilled a breath of air cold enough to make gooseflesh rise up Clara's arms. She stopped, and from the shadows, a voice. "I knew it was more than a cellar." It was Paul Theron. He stepped into the lantern light like he belonged there. Sleeves rolled, boots coated with pale dust, and that same too large hat tilted just so. But it wasn't the voice that stopped her. It was what he held, a chisel in one hand, and in the other, a piece of stone, dark, veined with something that shimmered faintly in the lamplight, not ordinary rock. "You don't even know what this is, do you?" he asked, holding it up. "It breathes, Clara. Stone that breathes. Only place I've ever found it. Been hunting vaults like this for 10 years, and yours sings." He was mad. That much she saw right away. Not drunk, not raving, but mad in the way scholars go when they forget food and sleep, chasing ideas no one else can see. She tried to step forward, but he raised the chisel. "Stay back. I don't want to hurt you, but I will. I can't let this vanish into another fire." "What do you want?" "To understand it, to see how far it goes, to find the seam. Your husband's wife didn't build this, not alone. No farmer did. This was carved by someone who knew the earth better than they knew their own name. I've seen this stone once before, in a ruin under a church near Pittsburgh. The pastor swore it had stayed cold for 200 years, buried in the same type of ridge, same kind of shale, same type of mortar. He wasn't lying. That's what made it worse." Clara said nothing. She knew men like this didn't listen to women, but they watched, and so she made him watch. She walked forward, slow, deliberate, hands empty, posture low. She looked at the walls, not at him. She ran a finger across the shelf she'd built. She touched the spot near the drain, where she'd packed sand around the seam. She knelt by the coal oil lantern and adjusted the wick, and then she said, quiet but sharp, "You chip another stone, I bury you with it." He blinked, laughed, but his hands were trembling. "I don't think you understand." "No, I don't think you do. That vault's kept 3 children alive, 2 neighbors from stroke, and every drop of food we got through last winter. You want to study it? Fine, wait till I'm dead. But while I'm breathing, you don't touch another inch." He opened his mouth. She raised her hand, and just then, Elias's voice from the house. "Clara, you down there?" Paul flinched like a deer hit by a stray breeze. He stepped backward. The chisel clanged against a stone edge as he turned. Clara reached down, found a hunk of iron from an old broken hinge she'd never thrown out, and threw it. It hit him in the leg, not hard, but enough. He slipped, fell against the doorframe, cursed, and scrambled up the slope like a fox fleeing smoke. By the time Elias came stumbling down with a lantern of his own, and a look halfway between fear and fury, the man was gone. Clara stood in the doorway of the vault, breathing hard, and didn't tell him everything. Not yet, but the chisel was still there, and so was the stone. She hid the stone behind the canned peaches and didn't sleep for 3 days. The next morning brought more heat, not just sun, but a weight in the air, the kind that made babies cry and hens stop laying, the kind that turned milk in a day and made iron handles on the barn doors too hot to touch. She worked without pause, moved all perishables to the far wall of the vault, wrapped jars in wool, dug shallow trays to hold damp cloth beneath the butter to keep it from sweating. And then she did something strange, something no one told her to do. She opened the floor. It was an impulse, a memory. Her own grandfather in Lancaster had once shown her a trick for finding dry rot in old homes. "Feel for the cold," he'd said, "follow the chill." And so she lifted the shale tiles she'd so carefully laid months before and pressed her hand flat against the earth beneath. It wasn't cold, it was freezing, not surface cold, not draft cold, deep cold, the kind of cold you'd find near caves filled with water, except there was no water, just stone, and a humming so low she wasn't sure it wasn't her own blood in her ears. She didn't tell Elias. He'd stopped asking questions by then. The vault worked. That's all he cared about. He'd gone into town twice now and come back with whispers. Folks curious if they could use that miracle of yours come August. Others were less kind. "Which built?" one man spat. "Ain't natural for food to stay that long, that cold." Clara stayed quiet, but she knew the stares were sharpening. That was when the boy went missing. Elias's youngest, Toby, 7, silent, skittish like a colt, vanished during the hottest part of the day. 1 minute playing by the pump, next minute gone. The search lasted hours. Fields combed, woods yelled through, no sign. Until dusk, when Clara lit the vault lantern to move the pickles, and there he was, curled against the stone wall like a cat, cheeks pink with sweat but breathing easy, eyes fluttering open like he'd just napped through a summer picnic. She didn't scold him. She knelt, gathered him into her lap, and rocked him there in the cold air, not saying a word. When Elias finally found them, the look on his face wasn't relief, it was worry. That night, after the boy was tucked away and the vault sealed, Elias said something he hadn't in months. "I think we should brick it up." She looked at him like he'd gone mad. "You saw what it did for Toby." "I did. That's the trouble." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the whole house is warm as a furnace, but that place, it's changing. The boy goes in there like a dog into a den, won't speak for days, but lays there like it's the only peace he's known. I ain't saying it's evil, but I don't think it's meant for this many people, not for this much use. The ground's different there. You said it yourself. That man wasn't digging for pickles." Clara didn't sleep again that night. 3 days later, the county sent word. Drought declared. Water rationing. Wells half dry. Crops browning at the stem. A local preacher claimed the ridge had been cursed since spring. "The earth's angry," he shouted from a wagon bed outside the post office. "And you all keep opening the wound." Clara knew what he meant. So did the vault. Because by then, by mid-August, with the sun high and grass dead and corn withering, the vault began to grow colder. She measured it. 22 degrees colder than the air at first. Then 26. Then 30. Too cold. Frost on the peach jars. Fog on the lamp glass. Her breath visible. She sealed the drain. No change. She burned an oil pan inside for an hour. No change. And still, the neighbors came. The Holt baby was sick again. The Mason hogs dying. The preacher's wife with a new batch of candles too soft to keep. They pleaded. They cried. Clara opened the door. She told herself it wasn't wrong, that it was mercy. But when Elias came down the slope at dusk and found her sitting beside the open vault, eyes vacant, hands raw from polishing the shelves again and again, he said only 3 words. "It's taking you." She shook her head. "I'm fine." But he stepped closer, touched her shoulder and said, "I lost one wife already. I ain't losing another to a hole in the ground." She laughed until she cried. "It's not a hole," she whispered. "It's the only place that's real anymore." That was the night Paul Theron came back for the last time. And he didn't bring a shovel. He brought dynamite. The fuse was already lit. By the time Elias saw the red glow ember winding its way into the soil near the vault's southern base, he was halfway down the rise with a hatchet in one hand and Clara's name in his throat. She didn't hear him at first. She was inside, of course. Where else would she be, with the heat thick as syrup and the whole house creaking like it wanted to collapse under its own sweat? The blast didn't go off, not that time, because Elias, running harder than he had since the war, dropped to his knees beside the smoking fuse and yanked it from the charge bundle with a hiss of blistering fingers, breaking the line just before it reached the powder casing. Clara came to the door of the vault and saw him hunched there, smoke curling around his arms, and then turned, just in time to see Paul standing at the tree line, eyes wide, hands raised. "I wasn't gonna hurt anyone," Paul shouted. Elias stood, shaking. "You almost killed my wife. She's already gone," Paul shouted back. "You don't see it, but I do. That thing's changing her. You think it's just a miracle cellar? It's pulling something from her. Look at her hands, her eyes. She's in there more than she's in your house." Clara hadn't moved. She stood still in the vault's doorway, no panic on her face, no fear. Her hands were tucked into her apron, and her shoulders were calm, too calm. Paul's voice cracked. "She talks to it." "What are you talking about?" Elias barked, stepping between them. "I heard her," Paul gasped, his voice turning wild. "Days ago. I was hiding, watching, I admit it, but she was alone in there, whispering, saying thank you, saying she understood now. Elias, that vault isn't just cold, it's alive." Clara's mouth opened, not in protest, in quiet astonishment, because part of her, some small, shameful part, knew Paul was right. Not that the stone breathed, not that it had eyes, but that something inside her had shifted since the vault became hers. Something slow, subterranean, like a root growing downward with no end. She had found peace in that place, not rest, not comfort, but peace, a kind of stillness the world never gave her. The way the lantern flame never flickered too much inside, the way the stone seemed to remember the shape of her hands, the way her heartbeat slowed each time she passed the threshold. And she had spoken to it. Not words, not really, but gratitude, murmurs, prayers of a sort. "Clara," Elias said, stepping back up the slope now, turning toward her. "Tell him he's wrong," but she didn't, and in her silence, Paul fled. This time Elias didn't chase him. He turned to her, quiet now, his voice the same one he'd used that first day on the porch when she'd stepped off the wagon and stared at the cracked paint on the door. "Do you feel it too?" She hesitated, then nodded. He closed his eyes, and for a long time neither of them said another word. 3 days passed. The vault was sealed, not bricked up, not locked, but sealed. Elias hammered thick oak beams into a cross frame over the door and packed the cracks with clay and straw, then roped a cedar plank across the front with the word "Stop" painted in tar. Clara didn't protest, not then. She simply stood by as he worked, didn't help, didn't hinder. The heat worsened, the corn crisped in the stalk, the hens stopped laying altogether, the creek bed dried to a cracked trail of mudflies buzzed over, and inside the house, their youngest coughed until blood streaked the cloths they pressed to his lips. That was when Elias broke. It was night. He'd been sleeping by the door, as if expecting Paul to return with something worse than dynamite, and the boy had been wheezing for an hour. Clara sat beside the bed with a basin of cool water and a linen cloth, cool only from shade, not from ice, because there was no more cold now. Nothing cold, nowhere cool enough to ease the fever. "Open it," Elias said. Clara turned to him, not trusting what she'd heard. "Just for tonight," he whispered. "Just for the boy." Clara shook her head slowly. "You sealed it. I was wrong." She watched him a long time, then stood, and for the first time in days, she walked toward the back slope. The vault door creaked when the beams came down, not from rot or rust, but from a kind of pressure, like the stone inside had held its breath for too long and now exhaled as the frame shifted. The scent that escaped was deeper than earth, not musty, not damp, but ancient, as if the stone remembered glaciers, remembered silence. Clara stepped forward, and it welcomed her. She brought the boy in wrapped in blankets. He stirred only once, eyes fluttering open long enough to see her face, then drifting shut again. Elias stayed outside. Inside the vault, Clara did what she had done once before, when the Holt baby had nearly died. She laid the boy down gently, propped his head, and sat beside him, fanning the still air with slow, rhythmic motions. The cold seeped up through the stone and through her bones, and she felt something settle in her spine. Not fear, not fatigue, stillness. The boy's breathing evened, his lips lost their blue tint, and Clara, watching the rise and fall of his chest, whispered again. Not words of prayer this time, words of thanks, and the vault answered, not in sound, but in sensation. The floor beneath her pulsed, once faintly, like a vein catching rhythm with her own heartbeat. The lantern flickered in response, not from wind, but from something deeper. She didn't recoil, she didn't cry, she simply nodded. "I know," and something within the stone, some long-buried resonance, seemed to nod back. Elias never asked what happened in that vault. He didn't need to. The next morning, the boy was upright, weak but eating, laughing even. Elias said nothing when Clara replaced the oak beams but left the vault unsealed. She covered the doorway with canvas, not wood, a gesture of reverence, not rejection. But by then, word had spread again. The Holts had seen a light down by the ridge that night. The preacher claimed he saw frost on Clara's hands, and one of the Mason brothers swore he found his missing sow sleeping near the vault door, tongue out, body pressed against the stone like a drunk against a barroom wall. They came again, first 2 neighbors, then 5, then a dozen. Some brought baskets of food, others brought tears. All of them asked for the same thing, just a moment, just an hour, just long enough to cool a child's skin or keep a fever from taking another. Clara refused them, not out of cruelty, but out of understanding. The vault was not meant to serve everyone. It was not a miracle well, it was a covenant, and it only kept what you gave back. She'd learned that now, and she'd already given enough. Then came the letter, a folded sheet of cream paper delivered by hand, by Paul Theron's own cousin, who looked just as gaunt, just as nervous. The letter bore no address, no stamp, just Clara's name written in looping, elegant script. She read it once, then again, and then burned it. Elias never asked what it said. He didn't need to. That night, she took a lantern down into the vault and didn't return for an hour. When she came back, she was pale, hands trembling. "Elias," she said, "if they come again, you tell them no." He nodded, and neither of them said another word about it. But the neighbors didn't stop. And when August turned to September, and the air refused to cool, and a second baby died from heat in the next county, the whispers began again. This time, darker, not awe, blame. They said Clara had made a pact, that she hoarded the cold like gold, that she chose who lived. And when the preacher's wife came weeping to the porch, asking for help and was turned away, the town made up its mind. The vault had to be opened, for everyone, or for no one. They came at night, 10 men, 2 with lanterns, 4 with axes, 1 with a pistol, and all of them with the same look in their eyes, righteous desperation. Elias met them at the porch. He didn't raise a hand, just said, "She's not here." "She's down there," one man snarled. "We saw the lantern light." "Oh, she's not here. She's hiding the cold. She's protecting what's hers," Elias said. "Same as any of you would." The man with the pistol raised it. "You move, and we make it even." And Elias, staring down the barrel, said the last brave thing he'd ever say. "Then shoot." They didn't, not that night, but they did drag him from the porch. And when the pistol struck his temple, Clara, down by the vault, heard the thud and rose. She didn't scream, she didn't run. She lit the second lantern and opened the vault one final time, because if they wanted it, they would have it, all of it. The first man to step into the vault didn't take his boots off. He didn't ask permission, didn't pause at the canvas flap Clara had left hanging limp over the open door. He ducked under it with the reckless confidence of someone who'd never been inside a real storm and didn't know how hard it would hit. His name was Micah Bell, farmhand turned deputy, loudest voice in the preacher's circle, and he carried a shotgun cradled in both arms like a child he didn't know how to comfort. Behind him came a wave of the others, lanterns in fists, sweat streaking down their necks. They looked like miners entering a shaft, but they were hunting something colder and far more dangerous than coal. Clara stood just inside. She said nothing as they entered, said nothing when they spread out, fanning through the tight stone chamber like dogs nosing a trap. The vault could only hold 4 comfortably. Now it strained with the bulk of 8 sweating men, each breath loud, each boot scuffed sharp against the stone floor. One of them, old Malcolm Rhine, who hadn't been in a church in 20 years, reached out and touched the wall. His hand recoiled. "Cold," he muttered. "Colder than I remember. It's unnatural," Micah said. Clara finally spoke. "It's older than all of us." Micah turned to her. "Then it don't belong to you." "I never said it did. You've kept it for yourself." "I kept it safe." "Safe from who?" he demanded. "Safe from the dying children up in Tuller's Ridge? Safe from the field hands that drop like flies in the heat? You sit on cold stone while the whole valley withers." Clara shook her head. "I gave it to those who asked with humility, who came with open hands, not fists. This place takes as much as it gives. You wouldn't know how to carry it. We ain't asking for your permission anymore." Micah reached for the lantern on the hook. It flickered as he touched it, a blue shimmer, quick as a blink. He didn't notice. "Get the beams," he called. "We'll pull the whole face down. Turn it into a proper ice house. Open it for the town." Clara stepped between him and the back wall. "You do that," she said, "and the cold will stop." Micah laughed. "Is that a threat?" "No," she said softly. "It's a warning." But they didn't hear it, because at that moment, Elias stumbled down the ridge, blood painting one side of his face, shirt torn open, limping with a fury that made the men outside drop their tools. He shouted her name. Clara turned just in time to see him fall to one knee, clutching his chest. That was when the pulse came, not from Elias, from the stone. A hum, not sound, but vibration. Every man in the vault paused. The lanterns flickered again. The flame turned blue. The temperature dropped. 6 degrees, then 8, then 10. Breath turned to fog in the air. Wood creaked. The wall at the rear of the vault darkened as if absorbing shadow, and the stone itself seemed to glisten, not wet, not ice, but something older than both, as if the memory of frost was returning. Micah turned. What is that? You broke its sleep, Clara whispered. You woke it up. He raised his shotgun, pointed it at the wall. Stop, she said. It's alive. It always was. Micah fired. The vault did not echo. There was no boom, only a dull thud, and then the blue flame in the lantern exploded outward. Not fire, not wind, cold. It surged forward in a pulse, hitting the men like a tidal wave of winter. Lanterns shattered, fingers froze around handles. A scream, raw, sharp, ripped from one man's throat before his teeth clamped down and snapped in the cold. Clara fell backward, hands raised, shielding her face. The vault groaned, not like wood, like the shifting of continents, stone to stone. A voice made from weight and pressure. Crack, the back wall split, just a hairline. But the air that came from it was deathless, not chill, not snow, something deeper, something from a time before warmth. The men fled, Micah first. They shoved past each other, stumbling into the night, screaming about ghosts, demons, witches, curses. One dropped to his knees and vomited in the field. Another tried to start a fire with wet matches just to feel the heat again. And Clara, she stayed. Elias reached her, fell beside her, and held her as the vault dimmed. The lantern went out, the cold receded, the seam in the back wall sealed itself, and the silence returned. 3 days later, the town sent word. No law would be enforced, no charges would be filed. But the preacher from his broken pulpit made his final decree. No one enters the hollow again. Let the stone lie. Let the bride keep her grave. Clara didn't answer. She didn't go into town again. Neither did Elias. They lived on the ridge as the summer baked the valley below. The corn died. The pigs withered. But the vault remained, and word spread far beyond the county. People came from Pittsburgh, from Philadelphia, not with guns, with letters, with questions, with instruments and notebooks and reverent awe. One woman from New York brought a thermometer, sealed in glass, and left it inside the vault for 2 days. It returned broken, the mercury crystallized. Another sent a telegram to a professor in Boston. Cold without source, stone unaged, structure sound, woman intact. But Clara stopped letting them in. The vault was no longer hers to offer. It had given once, and nearly been stolen. Now it rested, and the ground around it began to change, not withering, flourishing. Grass greened at the threshold, a fig tree rooted near the northern stone, and at night the frogs returned. Elias grew slower. His limp stiffened. The wound on his temple left a white scar, but he never once asked her to seal the vault again. He said little, only this: "When it's my time, don't bury me in the churchyard." Clara nodded. "I won't." He died in October, first frost on the ground. Clara carried his body down the ridge, wrapped in wool, past the empty chicken coop and the cracked corn rows, and into the vault. She lit the lantern, sat with him for a day, then sealed the door, just once. Winter came early. The town felt it. 20 miles in all directions, but the ridge stayed mild, not warm, not frozen, balanced. And every day, Clara walked the rise. She didn't speak to it anymore. She didn't need to. The cold was listening, and that was enough. But years later, when the valley was nearly forgotten, and the town no longer on maps, and the preacher long since turned to ash, a man arrived on horseback, dressed in linen, pale as bone. He carried no shovel, no rifle, just a map, and on that map was a red X, drawn over a shaded mark labeled simply Stone Vault, Source. He stood at the edge of the ridge as the sun beat down. The heat shimmered, and still he felt it, a chill, not on the wind, but beneath his feet. He smiled and stepped forward. He found the vault just before dusk. The grass didn't crunch under his boots. It bowed. The ridge was quiet, as if birds and insects alike held their breath. The fig tree was still there, taller now, its trunk twisted like a question mark, leaves broad and green despite the baked hillsides below. The man dismounted slowly, brushing the dust from his sleeves with fingers too clean for someone who'd ridden this far. He wasn't sweating. He didn't even carry water. In his breast pocket was a folded paper, yellowed, creased at the corners, sealed in a pouch of waxed leather. The handwriting was unmistakable, elegant, looping but deliberate. The kind of script you only learn when taught by someone who knows how to make each letter count. It was Clara's. The man knelt at the edge of the vault. The door was different now. Not wood, not canvas, stone, seamless, without hinges, flush with the rise itself. No handle, no lock, no gap, just a flat, curved face like a headstone turned sideways, and embedded in the earth. Moss grew at the edges, insects crawled across it and vanished. The temperature at its base was unmistakable, 54 degrees, 22, below the heat that shimmered in the air above. He touched it with his palm. The stone answered with a low vibration, as if it remembered. Clara had died 12 years before that moment. She wasn't found for 2 more. A boy from a distant township, sent to scout water, had wandered up the ridge and discovered the house half covered in bramble. The porch had collapsed. The barn was gone. But inside the parlor, on a chair turned toward the window, sat Clara Hetfield, eyes closed, hands folded, a blanket drawn neatly over her lap. They said she looked peaceful, too peaceful, like she hadn't been waiting to die, but waiting to be collected. They buried her by the fig tree. No one dared open the vault, no one tried, but the boy who found her had taken something, a journal, half burned in the hearth. He brought it back to the university that had once sent men with instruments and gloves, and for years it was passed around between professors and crackpots, none able to agree on what it truly described. The vault, the cold, the change in the land, the humming. But one man believed, and now he knelt in front of the door. His name was Lucian Fairweather, doctor of thermodynamics, student of forgotten architectures, and grandson to Paul Theron. He had come to finish what Paul started, but he didn't come to steal, he came to listen. He sat beside the stone, unrolled the journal, and read it aloud, not loudly, softly, each page, each line. Day 12. The cold has grown stronger, but not cruel. Day 43. Elias sleeps deeper now. He says the dreams are clean. Day 82. The wall pulses when the boy laughs. I think it listens. Day 110. The frost isn't melting even in my hands. Day 134. I don't think it wants us to go. He stopped reading. The wind moved slightly. Lucian laid the journal down and placed his palm again against the vault. And this time he heard it, not with ears, with memory, a whisper, not words, not voices, but resonance, like the sound of breath beneath soil, of mountain roots sighing in relief. And then a crack, a seam appeared down the center of the stone, thin, sharp, and the door began to open, not wide, not violently, just enough. Lucian stood, peered inside, and saw nothing, nothing but dark. And then her voice, not loud, not ghostly, but as if recorded in the stone. You came with reverence, he blinked. Clara, no answer, but the cold intensified, a pulse, like a heartbeat, the same hum Paul Theron had written about. Lucian stepped forward, once, twice, stopped. There, on the wall to the left, carved by hand, were dozens of names, scratched deep, some familiar, some ancient. Elias, Toby, the Holt baby, others he didn't know. At the bottom, one more, Lucian, already carved, still warm. He turned, but the door was gone. No light behind him, no air, just stone and cold. Clara's fig tree bloomed for 70 more years, even after the last farm was reclaimed by ivy, even after the county was redrawn, and the ridge lost its name. Locals said the stone vault was buried forever when the floods came. Others whispered it had only sealed itself again, waiting, but the ground still stayed cool there, even in July, even without trees. Some say it's a spring, others say it's just good shale. But once, a child lost in the hills fell asleep beneath that fig tree and woke up without a single bite on his skin, no sunburn, no heat stroke, and whispered, "There was a woman in the stone." She sang to me. No one believed him. But when they took him to town and checked his pulse, it was slow, too slow, steady, as if it had been sleeping in the cold for 100 years. And so the vault remains, buried, waiting, remembering, and beneath the surface of a forgotten Pennsylvania hill, the cold still breathes.